Have you ever reached the point where you thought, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, so why do I still feel like something is missing? I know that feeling very well. After living with MS or multiple sclerosis for more than 35 years, there have been many chapters when I became incredibly good at researching my health. I learned about nutrition, movement, supplements, stress, sleep, and all the different pieces that can influence how I feel. I've worked with different practitioners, read the books, asked the questions, and tried more things than I could probably remember if you asked me to make a whole list of it today. And some of those things really helped me. Some of them didn't. Some worked beautifully for a period of time, and then my body changed, or my circumstances changed, or MS simply decided we were playing by a different set of rules that day. That is one of the interesting things about living with a chronic condition for decades. You become very familiar with your body, but your body doesn't necessarily become predictable. And somewhere along the way, I realized I was exhausted from trying to be good at having MS. Hi, I'm Wendy Bjork, founder of heartsofwellness.com. If you're new here, I've been navigating life with MS for more than 3 decades, and much of the work I do today comes from what those years have actually taught me about living well when your health doesn't always cooperate with your plans. For a long time, I thought the answer was going to come from knowing more. And to be fair, knowledge has been incredibly important in my journey. Learning to advocate for myself, understanding my body, and becoming willing to explore different ways of supporting myself have all made a huge difference. But there came a point when I realized that more information wasn't necessarily creating more clarity. Sometimes it was creating more noise. When you've lived with a chronic illness for a while, you probably know exactly what I mean. There's always the well meaning people who are ready with another suggestion. Have you tried this? Have you stopped eating that? Have you heard about this supplement? Have you seen this doctor? What about yoga, meditation, a different diet, a different exercise program? After all these years with MS, I can assure you I have thought about my health a lot. There have been periods when managing could have practically been a full time job. There were the appointments, the research, figuring out the food, the exercise, managing my energy, paying attention to my sleep, and trying to determine when I needed rest and when I needed to challenge myself a little. And with MS, even that can change from day to day or from hour to hour. I can have a plan for what I want to accomplish, and then my body has an entirely different opinion about the schedule. For years, when something wasn't working, my instinct was often to look for the next piece of information. Maybe there was something I hadn't discovered yet. Maybe there was another approach I needed to investigate. Maybe this was finally the missing piece. And sometimes, yes, I discovered something valuable. But I also noticed that every new answer seemed to create three new things I was supposed to be doing. At some point, I had to ask myself, when did taking care of myself turn into spending so much of my life thinking about taking care of myself? That was a turning point for me. I started to pay attention to something that wasn't even on any of my wellness checklists. It was me, not Wendy with MS, not Wendy researching another symptom, not Wendy trying to optimize another part of her health, just being me. I started asking different questions. What do I actually need today? What gives me energy rather than constantly requiring energy from me? What am I doing because it really supports me? And what am I doing because someone somewhere told me that this is what a person who is serious about her wellness is supposed to do? What I've learned about myself after all these years that I need to trust. Those questions were very powerful because chronic illness can quietly train you to organize an enormous part of your life around what's wrong. Appointments get put on the calendar, energy gets calculated, travel gets considered differently. You learn to think ahead about things that other people may not have even thought about. That's part of living with MS for me. And I'm not pretending otherwise, but I reached a point where I didn't want MS sitting at the head of the table, making every decision about my life. Yes, it's part of my story. It has shaped me in ways I never would have anticipated, and it's taught me things I never would have volunteered to learn. But it doesn't get to be the entire story. And that's when my understanding of wellness began to expand. I still care about the practical things. I pay attention to what I eat. I move my body. I notice my energy. I make choices based on what it's capable of doing. I use tools and practices that I've learned that genuinely support me. I'm not throwing any of that away. What changed was that I started noticing another layer of my wellness that wasn't as easy to measure. I began paying more attention to how I felt around certain situations and people. I noticed how often I overrode my own instincts. I noticed how much energy it took when I pushed myself because I thought I should be able to do something. And I began noticing the difference between something that was truly supporting me and something that had simply become another item on my wellness to do list. That's the part I've become fascinated with. I think of it as the hidden root of wellness. When you look at a tree, most of what keeps it alive is happening underneath the surface. We see the branches, the leaves, the flowers, but we don't see what's happening below. I've come to believe there can be a hidden layer to our wellness, too. For me, it wasn't about discovering one more miraculous thing to do. It was about learning to listen underneath everything I was already doing. Because I could have a beautiful list of wellness practices and still ignore the fact that I was exhausted. I could research another solution while already knowing somewhere inside myself that what I really needed to do that day was rest. I could become so focused on improving my health that I forgot to ask a simpler question. Am I enjoying my life? There wasn't a protocol that could answer that for me. Nobody could hand me the perfect instructions. I'd spent years becoming an excellent researcher. Eventually, I realized I also needed to become an excellent listener. That has changed the way I approach my health today. When something isn't working, I don't automatically assume the answer is to add something else. I try to pause long enough to notice what's actually happening. Sometimes the answer is practical. I need to change something. I need more support. I need to move. I need to rest. Sometimes I need to stop analyzing myself and go do something that makes me feel alive. And sometimes I need to recognize that I'm carrying stress, expectations, or responsibilities that have nothing directly to do with MS, yet my body is certainly experiencing them. That discernment has become one of the most valuable things I've learned in more than 3 decades of living with chronic illness. So, if you're watching this and you're the person who has done the research, knows the protocols, and has already spent years trying to understand your body, I want you to know that I understand how exhausting that can become. You don't necessarily need to try harder. Maybe the next chapter is about becoming more selective. What actually supports you? What have you outgrown? What are you continuing to do simply because you think you're supposed to? What has your own lived experience taught you? And maybe the biggest question of all, what do you already know that you've been too busy searching for answers to hear? These days, I don't want my health to be the most interesting thing about my life. I want to travel. I want to laugh. I want to learn and remain curious. I want to have meaningful conversations and new experiences. I want to do things that have absolutely nothing to do with multiple sclerosis. Of course, I'm still going to take care of myself. That's not changing. What has changed is the relationship. My wellness practices are here to support the life I want to live. They're not supposed to become my life. If you've reached that point too, I'd love to hear from you. And I'd love for you to think about these and maybe even journal on them. What is one thing you're tired of chasing in your wellness journey? It can be one word or an entire story. I think there's a very important conversation waiting underneath that question. I'm Wendy Bjork, founder of heartsofwellness.com. If you're interested in exploring what it really means to live well when life and health haven't gone according to plan, subscribe, stay connected. Visit me on our webpage. We're going to explore much more of this together. Until next time, stay well.